चालेल.
लिंक कुठेतरी येते ना ती.
हे करा ना, मोठं करा ना. इकडे कुठे नाही ना सेटिंगमध्ये वगैरे नाही. इकडे कुठेतरी होती ना ती स्ट्रीमिंग RTM स्ट्रीमिंग. हां, हे स्ट्रीमिंग काय आहे? स्ट्रीमिंग वरती हां नाही ना, नाही ते नाही.
त्या दिवशी मिळाली होती ना.
हां हां नाही, ह्याच आहेत. हे एक ऑप्शन बघा ना, हे राईटचे आहेत ते. हां, फेवरेटवरती, गॅलरीवरती, इफेक्ट, कोणता 3 डॉट?
इथे
हाँ ये
प्लेलिस्ट
इसके बाजू वाला. रो त्याच्या बाजूचा हां प्लेलिस्ट नाही. ठीक आहे, दिल्यानंतर रेकॉर्डेड पाठवून द्या. हां चालू करू.
Okay, good morning. I think after last time's lecture, here we had seen the basics of the structural analysis and the computer-based method which we had discussed at length last time. Today we are going to discuss the basics of the structural design because you will be finally carrying out the structural design of the members. Our primary aim today and maybe next lecture will be design of RCC members, wherein the design is the second stage, where your first stage would involve analysis of the structure. Once the analysis results are ready, then your next stage will be to carry out the design based on the sizes that you have assumed and so on and so forth. So our today's presentation will be, we will review briefly the things we have learnt in first 3 lectures. Then we will consider the basic design concept for RCC members, as to what criteria we use for carrying out the structural design. Then the 3 basic methods which we shall briefly review would be the working stress method, the ultimate stress method, and finally the limit state method. So these 3 methods which have got some theoretical background, and ultimately of course we will be using the limit state method and so on and so forth. Later on we will see the individual design of the members, which is primarily for 4 different causes: the axial force, the shear force, the bending moment, and torsion moment. And later on of course the actual member will always have the combined action. All the forces will be acting together. Okay, now considering this, we will consider the basic things which we have learnt in the previous lectures. The primary objective of structural engineering activity, we have seen that our objective is to plan, design and implement the structure. The basic classification of structure we have seen for various types of applications, right from trusses to block type foundations, more complex structures and so on. Then we have seen the building blocks of the structures, where individual structures are made up of the components. Like trusses, you have got members, the buildings has got beams, columns, slabs and so on as the components and so on. Then we have seen that we need to use different materials for different applications. Like in reinforced concrete, we have the concrete as such, then we have the reinforcement. While for steel structure, we have other options, direct use of the structural sections, or more other materials are also being used, like aluminium or glass and so on and so forth. Then we have seen that we have to apply loads on the structure which are due to various causes, which we have seen last time, that they are due to gravity load, self weight, in the live load, the wind, the earthquake, and so on and so forth. Then we have seen the tools of analysis earlier, where we have seen that we have the equations of equilibrium, we have the compatibility conditions, and we have the Hooke's law, which gives us the linear elastic behavior of the material, and so on and so forth. Later on, we have considered in lecture 2 various theories which are used in carrying out the stress analysis, that once you determine the individual forces, then you need to convert the forces into stresses. These may be directly due to axial force converted to axial stress. Then we have the bending moment converted to the bending stress, which is tension and compression in two different phases. Then we have the shear force converted into shear stress, the torsional moment converted to torsional stresses. So various theories, the assumptions involved, and so on we had seen. And then we have seen some simple governing equations of structural engineering concepts, which are the theories of bending, or the buckling formula, or the torsion formula, and so on and so forth. Okay. Considering that, now we see that in last lecture we have seen the basic classification of structures in terms of determinate and indeterminate structure. We have seen that basically most of the structures which we come across are indeterminate structures. Then we have the basic principles of structural analysis, wherein we consider that given a structure, we visualize that under the influence of applied loads, it's going to deform, and after deformation, it's going to develop internal forces. So our idea is to calculate those internal forces in terms of displacements, and then write down the usual equations of equilibrium to finally determine the displacements in the structure, and use those displacements for carrying out the further processing, that is determining the internal forces and so on. The relationship between force and displacement, which we have defined last time as the stiffness of the member. So we have various types of stiffnesses, like we have the axial stiffness, we have the bending stiffness, we have the torsional stiffness, and so on and so forth. So all these things we have seen so far, wherein we have considered that given a structure, now your objective is to analyze the structure, and then the next step would be to design the structure. For analysis purpose, we have seen all these basic concepts and seen that given a structure, now our objective would be to analyze the structure and carry out the detailed design as a second step. So we say that you have a typical structure like this space frame which I have shown, which a typical building frame you can say, which has got as you can see over here, that for this particular structure which is taken from this ETAB model. So you have got various structural components, like you have got the columns, you have got the beams, then you have got the slabs, and so on. And in the end, when you see the 3D view of that finally you will be designing the structure at the foundation level to provide adequate foundations to it. So we have 4 basic components in a building, simple building, which we have considered, like the slab, the beam, the columns, and finally the foundations. So all these need to be firstly analyzed. I need to know the forces in them, and then consider the design as the subsequent step over there. Okay. So we say that as far as the general data for this particular building is concerned, wherein we have got this typical model made in ETABS, where we have considered this simple data, that you have got columns of this size 600 by 600, you have got beam of the size 300 by 750 depth, you have got slab which is 200 thick, you have got floor finish, the loads which you have to consider, the wall load also is considered, then you have got the live load 4 kilonewton per square meter, you have got floor height of 3 meters, and the column spacing is 8 meter. So this typical model which we have taken for this building, which involves simple, you can say, kind of data feeding to the computer, because our objective is to analyze the structure, determine the forces in the members of the structure. For that purpose, you have to have a structure with these various components. So we have these components as columns, beams, and so on. So that all planning is done by you as an engineer or in consultation with architect. Once all these things are decided at some level, then your objective is to finally determine the forces in the member. As we have seen that to determine forces, I have to have the layout of the structure. That is firstly the you can say the geometry of different members, that is its cross-sectional dimensions, its length, and so on. Then we need to know the material you are using, whether what grade of concrete you are using, the reinforcement if you want to later on consider for design, then you need to supply that information also as to what grade of steel you are using, and so on and so on. Okay, with all that data supplied to the software that you are using, your idea is to determine internal forces due to these various loads which you are considering. The loads that you are considering are, in this case I have taken very simple system of loads, the self weight, then you have got some dead weight in terms of the floor finish, the walls, and so on, and some live load which we have taken. Other types of loads later on, as you see more complex structures, then maybe you may consider the earthquake force, the wind loads, and the temperature deformations, and so on and so forth. So all these loads which is part of the data that you have to consider. So all these you need to consider, and then consider the analysis of the structure as such. So we say that having considered the data as supplied to us, we construct a mathematical model out of that, which involves or which represent the geometry of the structure. Further, we give the engineering data to it in terms of material property that you are using, in terms of the loads you are applying on it, and so on and so forth. With all that done, now you have to consider this data and analyze it with the stiffness method which we have seen last time. Now, as I had indicated to you earlier, that for stiffness method at each joint you have got some displacements, and those displacements are taken as unknown. With those displacements as unknowns, you consider the representation of individual forces in terms of displacement. So if I consider this particular frame, then we see that at each of the joint that you are considering, for such joint, if you consider its geometry, then we see that this being a three-dimensional structure, you have got three linear displacements, u, x, y, z, and three rotational displacements. So at each joint I have 6 unknown displacements. Likewise, if I have got as many number of joints, then we say that there are so many unknowns involved in this particular structure. As far as the support is concerned, we say that at support we have got these 6 displacements which otherwise would have occurred, but now because of the support condition, we say that they are distant, so they are prevented from having their effects. So we say that those joints are fixed, no displacement occurs at that point at the support. With all these displacement restrained, then we say that our structure is ready for analysis. We have got all other joints which have got some displacements. Now with these displacements, I will have these beams developing forces in terms of displacements. Those displacements will be all as unknown. So I will write down equations of equilibrium at each joint in terms of forces in the members meeting at that joint. So at this joint, I will write down 6 equilibrium equations in terms of, for example, if I consider equilibrium equation for forces in x direction, then I will consider for all the members meeting at that point the force in x direction due to displacements which are occurring. So I have got a member which is undergoing some displacements at this joint and at the other joint. With those displacements, I will try to work out the forces in the members in terms of displacements and then write down the equations of equilibrium. So in each direction of displacement, I will write down one equation, and then I will have all those equations of equilibrium which contain forces in terms of unknown displacements. So on solving these equations of equilibrium, I will be able to determine the displacements. Okay. Now that is all as far as the internal working of the method is concerned. So we say that we have got a massive problem before us, and we are going to analyze this particular structure subjected to all these loads. Those many equations of equilibrium will be written down, they will be solved by the software, and in the end you will be able to get the displacements, and you will be able to get the internal forces in the members. Okay, so we say that our entire process involving the analysis of structure is consisting of these items. That is, you have planned a given structure like the space frame building that we have seen. So what type of structure you have got is the information given to you. What type of material you are going to use, the information given to you, be concrete or steel or so. So that decision is made at a earlier stage, and so on and so forth. What kind of structural system you will be having, whether it is a industrial structure involving trusses or frames, or a building structure with normal beams, columns and so on. Then we prepare a mathematical model of that in a given software. So our idea is take this data from the source from where the information is supplied to you, prepare a mathematical model and supply the data to the software. Then for supplying the data we need to consider the materials and the sizes of the members. So for carrying out the analysis you need to know the size of the material, size of the given sections. As you have no idea how much force is coming there, it is your judgment that you, from your past experience or by some approximate method, you try to do the sizing of the members. If later on you find that this size cannot take this force, or it is too large a size, later on if you realize, then better later on you can revise your process, revise the model and reanalyze it and so on. Once you do that initial sizing of the different members, then you have to assign the loads to the structure. So you have got, as you have seen for this particular model, that you have got for this particular structure you are applying, for example in this particular case, some wall load you are applying. Okay, so we say that for the given structure now you have applied this wall load. So we can see that you have got this wall load applied on the given beam. So if I try to see the loads which I am considering, so I have considered this 6 kilonewton per meter as the wall load. So we see that on each of the member that you have got, either you can give such types of loads which are described per unit length. Then you have got the slab load indicated over here. So for the floor slab, if you see it, okay, for the floor slab now you have got similarly the loads. So you have got the floor finish load 2 kilonewton per square meter and so on and so on. So this load is specified on different structural members over here, and then using this information now we say that we have supplied the entire data to the given system, and accordingly once all the loads are given, then we say that our structure is ready for analysis and we have got the system ready over here. So we say that after supplying the entire data in terms of different members, in terms of their geometry, in terms of the materials, the loads applied, then the supports you are providing and so on and so forth, and then we say that the analysis of the entire structure is done. So with analysis done, now we say that for the given structure we have got the results ready for analysis in terms of the different members and their we can see the different loading conditions that we have considered and so on and so forth. So we say that as far as the given structure is concerned, we have considered the analysis of the structure, and consider as far as the loading cases are concerned, we have considered these simple loading cases for carrying out the analysis. We have got the dead weight, then we have got the live load, we have got the floor finish, the wall load. I think this model right now we will not discuss that, that we will discuss subsequently. And then we have got the loading combinations over here. So we say that for the given structure, what kind of structure you have got. So you have got the we can see over here concrete frame, and you have got concrete slab and so on. So with those loading cases, now you have got some loading combinations depending upon the kind of you can say design you are going to carry out. So we say that having considered these loads, for design purpose there will be dead load plus live load, or dead load plus live load plus earthquake, and so on and so forth. So all these loading combinations you have to consider, and then you are ready for analysis. So these are all simple steps which anyway you have been trained to use. So we say that our structure is analyzed, and having analyzed the structure, now I have got the detailed results available to me. So I will say that as far as my structure is concerned, I have got the results available for bending moment. For example, I will now consider the situation over here. Okay, I think
ओके नाही केलं डिफाईन करताना अनालिसिस परत एकदा
this frame design and slab design.
Convert to user.
That user. So now I will consider the analysis of
करायला लागेल ना
analysis is ready. I will consider now the moments which are developed in the given structure. So I will say that consider only one of the floors, for example. So I am considering only one floor, and now want to see what are the forces developed in it. So I will now consider for some combination which is dead plus live load. I will now consider the moments which are developed in the given structure. So now we can see that we have got the bending moment diagram for the given structure, various components. That is, you have got these beams developing so much of positive moment, and near the support you have got the negative moments, and so on. So we say that our analysis results into all these internal forces in the different members. If you see the columns, for example, so in the columns you can see that you have got the individual forces developed. Okay. Okay, so for the columns you can see that you have got these bending moments developed in different columns, and so on and so on. So we can see that for different members the forces are developed. So we say that our analysis is primarily done to determine the forces in the member. Our next stage is of course designing the different members for providing reinforcement and so on. But you have got basically the results of analysis, which is the most important step in the entire process, that you prepare the mathematical model, apply the loads on it, carry out the analysis, determine the displacements, the internal forces, and then you are ready for designing the given structure. So we say that we have got in different members, you have got different structural responses. You have got the axial force, you have got the shear force in x direction, in one of the direction of the cross section. You have got shear force in the other direction. So if you have got a member like this, you can have a shear force like this or like that. Okay, two different directions of shears are available. And similarly, you have got torsional moment, you have got the bending moment in one direction, bending moment in other direction, and so on. So all the forces are determined, and thereby we say that our results are ready. If you consider, for example, the types of results which are produced over here, then we say that anyway you all well versed with it, so we will quickly see the kinds of results which are available for us. So we say that for some of the beams, if you see the kind of results which are available, then we say that for the given structure, now you have got all the set of forces available for different loading cases, and those we will be able to later on use for design purpose. So all the results which are available, so you can see that for the given structure, so for any floor, if you take one of the beam, then we see that for each of the member you have got forces due to dead load, then there are other cases, then you have got the combination forces, and so on and so forth. So we can see that for the same member you get forces due to various combinations of loads and so on, and the forces which are developed are 6 in number, namely you have got axial force, you have got shear force in y direction, shear force in z direction, then you have got the torsional moment, you have got moment about one of the axis and moment about the other axis. So we see that we are this way able to get all the forces in the members which are to be later on used for design purpose. So we say that at this stage we are ready to carry out the design of the structure. So we have done all this exercise to finally get forces in the members which are to be used for design purpose. So for design purpose, now we say we have got in all 4 types of forces: the axial force, which may be either tension or compression; you have got shear force in any of the direction, the shear force; you have got bending moment for any of the axis of rotation; and lastly you have got the torsional moment. So you need to design the RCC member or any structural member for that purpose to resist these 4 types of forces. The design is to be carried out, therefore we say, for resisting or these internal forces which are developed in the given structure. Okay. Now we say that when our next stage is to be considered, that is design purpose, then we say that for design purpose I want to ensure that the given member which has developed so much of force, now I want to see that it is safe for its cross section, the reinforcement that I am putting into it and so on, is safe enough to carry out all those forces. So I will say that for design purpose I have to see in what way the member will fail and then prevent against that kind of failure. So we say that failure due to overstress, there is a material which has got some capacity to carry stress. Now I must provide such dimensions to the member cross section so that the stress is limited to the permissible stress in the given member. So I will say that I must firstly see that the member will not fail by overstressing. So there is a permissible stress and I want to ensure that failure doesn't occur due to excessive stress. Second criteria of failure, that for any structure that we consider that if it deforms excessively, then we say that no matter, it may be safe, but still the excessive deformation is not acceptable for various reasons, and therefore we will say that the members that we provide should ensure that the structure doesn't deform excessively. The third type of failure that we consider for members which are primarily either axially loaded or for long span beams is that they should not fail due to buckling. So many times the length of the member, if it is too large, then under the influence of a small axial force also it will buckle. So we can say that the buckling type of failure is also to be avoided. And lastly, in case of industrial structures and so on, where many rotating machines are placed on that and so on, so there also we have to ensure that due to this repeated loading, due to vibrations and so on, the failure should not occur. So we must ensure as to what is the criteria to restrict the stresses so that the fatigue failure doesn't occur. So fatigue is another kind of failure which you have to anticipate in the given situation and then guard against that kind of failure. Okay. So we say that for considering the failure of the structure, you must anticipate what kind of failure would occur and then guard against that kind of failure. So now we say that okay, I have understood what kinds of failure would occur. So now I want to carry out the actual design of the RCC or any structural member. Presently we will consider the actual RCC member. Okay. Now we have got 3 different methods of designing the member, RCC member. One is the working stress method, 2 is the ultimate theory, ultimate load theory, and 3 is the limit state method. So you have got 3 different methods of analysis. Out of that, now our code primarily permits limit state method, but for understanding we will consider the other 2 methods also, just to see what basic concepts are involved, because limit state method encompasses these 2 methods. The first one was the earliest method, the working stress method, which was in use for quite some time, and over the years it has given rise to, due to various reasons, to ultimate load theory, and finally the limit state method. Okay. So we say that we have got the working stress method, where working stress method is based on the linear elastic behavior of the material. So we say that we want to ensure that the structure will always remain elastic to start with. Okay. Under elastic behavior, there is a permissible stress. So we say that there is, for example, for concrete, we say that you have got M20 or M25, M30 grade concrete. Now M30 grade concrete has got the ultimate crushing strength of 13 Newton per mm square. Okay. Now we use some factor of safety to see that if the stresses are limited to ultimate stress upon factor of safety. So for concrete, in most of the cases we use factor of safety of 3. So we say that if it is M30 concrete, then I will have a factor of safety 3, so that my compressive stress will be limited to 10 Newton per mm square. Okay. So I will say that my permissible stress, if it is within that limit, then okay, I will say that it is a safe design. The factor of safety for concrete, therefore we say, is 3. For steel, because steel is a factory produced material which has got better quality control, unlike concrete which is made at site and so on. So we say that for steel, because of the guarantee that it has got certain definite strength, we use a lesser factor of safety, say 1.8 and so on and so on. And the loads that we consider for working stress method are the actual loads, service load as we say. There is no load factor involved. There is no any other factor by which you have to multiply the load and something like that. So we say that we have to consider actual load on the structure, calculate actual stress developed in the material, and then see that it is within elastic limit. So your stress which involves as permissible stress, so you have got ultimate stress which is converted into a permissible stress with a factor of safety, and then we say that okay, if my stress while designing purpose is within that permissible stress, then I am ensuring that it is a linearly elastic behavior, and that is my safe design. Okay. So we say that our working stress method has got a very simple concept. It should be linearly elastic, and if the stress is within the permissible limit, then I say that that is safe. At what load it is going to fail, the structure, at what load it is going to collapse, that I cannot say at this stage, because I don't know the behavior of the structure beyond elastic limit. Because once I say my permissible stresses are exceeded, I have got a factor of safety of 3. But does it mean that if I increase the load by 3 times, will the failure occur? So I am not very sure, because I only know that the behavior of the structure is guaranteed under linear elastic behavior. So if the elastic behavior is there, okay, my structure is safe. But beyond that, how it is going to behave, I don't know, because my theory is not applicable. It is a linearly elastic behavior. So as soon as the stress exceeds the linear elastic behavior, then we say that okay, the theory does cease to be applied. So this theory cannot predict the failure load. So I will not know what is the factor of safety against failure. I only know, considering the material strength, as to what is the factor of safety I have provided, but that is no guarantee that structure will fail at 3 times the larger load, because beyond elastic limit the behavior is different. It is not linearly elastic. So I cannot say that if the load is increased 3 times, the deformation will be 3 times. No, because beyond elastic limit my E value changes, so my deformations will be different, and so on and so forth. So we can say that my working stress method ensures elastic behavior, but to that extent I am guaranteed that until the load is limited to that design load, the behavior is going to be linearly elastic. Okay, fine. Then we say that in ultimate load method the situation is different. We say that in ultimate load method we adopt a load factor, that is, I have got some actual load specified, like the live load we have seen that okay, it is 4 kilonewton per square meter, or maybe wall load I have taken something like. So I will say that okay, if that is the actual load, let me increase it by load factor. So I am increasing it by sometimes by 1.5 or 1.8, depending upon the kind of code that you are applying, the theory you are applying, and so on and so forth. So firstly I will say that if this is my service load, I am presuming, or by using the codes of practice and so on, that the failure load I am expecting is that load factor times the service load. So my service load, for example, I am considering 4 kilonewton per square meter, and if my load factor is 1.6, then I will presume that the structure has got the ultimate capacity supposed to be 1.6 times this load. Okay, so I will say that the ultimate load that the structure is expected to carry, beyond which it is going to definitely fail, is a service load multiplied by 1.5, 1.8, whatever is the load factor that you are applying. And the failure criteria, earlier for working stress method we had permissible stress, okay, which was related to some factor of safety. Now here for ultimate this theory, ultimate load theory, we are saying that the ultimate strain of the material is taken as the failure criteria. That strain of the material, like in concrete, it is 0.2% or something like that. So for every material, the ultimate strain is specified, that at failure this will be the failure strain. So I will say that I will calculate for my ultimate load. So this my ultimate load, if you see over here, which is service load multiplied by the load factor. For that load I will calculate what is the strain in different materials, because I have different theories to convert moment into stress into strain using Hooke's law and so on. So I will say that with all these theories before me, I will be able to consider the strain in the section that I have provided, and thereby I will say that okay, this has got so much strain, the ultimate strain is so much, and therefore I will say that okay, whether the structure is having adequate margin of safety or not. So I will say that if I am having 1.8 as a load factor, then at that ultimate load will the structure fail. So I will design the structure in such a way that at 1.8 times the service load, the section is so provided that it will develop the ultimate strain. So I am guaranteeing that if you increase the load factor by that value 1.8 times, then failure is guaranteed. So I can say that okay, I have got so much load factor or factor of safety for that matter, though they don't call it as factor of safety in ultimate load theory. It is called as the load factor. So I am saying that with a load factor of 1.8, if the load is increased by 1.8, then it is definitely going to fail. Okay, so I will say that I have got the failure criteria somehow related in my design process itself. So I will say that if I am using ultimate load theory, then I am ensuring that it has got 1.8 times as a margin or 1.6 times as a margin, beyond which I will definitely say that I am not responsible, the structure is going to fail. So I have got a definite answer to my question, that at what load you predict the structure is going to fail. In working stress method we didn't have that particular you can say guarantee that with a factor of safety of 3 will it take 3 times the load. So that guarantee was not there, because beyond the elastic limit my theory is not applicable. So it has only a pseudo, you can say, or a false guarantee that you have provided a factor of safety of 3, but in reality factor of safety may be less or may be more depending upon the material that you are considering and so on. So I will say that my ultimate load theory is based on somewhat rational basis. So I will say that okay, the load is increased by a factor, and at that load I am ensuring that the strain is equal to the failure strain. So I will say that okay, with that margin the structure is going to fail, and otherwise I can guarantee that the failure is going to be avoided so long as the load is lesser than that. While the third method, which is now most popular and is currently used, is the limit state method of analysis. Here we say that as far as the working stress method or the ultimate stress method, we were all the time worried about the stress as a criteria. That is working stress, you have got a permissible stress, so long as stress is within that, okay, everything was safe. In ultimate stress theory also we have a service load increased by that, and related to ultimate strain we had a failure criteria. That failure was related to strain, and strain of course is again related to stress. So we again say that there was only one failure criteria in both the theories, that you have failure related to stress. But in limit state method we say that there are various failure criteria. structure can fail in a number of ways depending upon the functional requirement for that particular structure and so on. So we say that for a structure it can fail. One is your limit state of collapse. Okay, so our limit state of collapse, that is the structure will collapse, we will say either due to flexure or due to compression, excessive compression, or failure due to combined action, compression and uniaxial movement, and so on and so forth. So various types of failures can occur. Failure can be due to shear or due to torsion, or it may be failure due to debonding of reinforcement with concrete, and so on and so forth. So we say that there are various limit state which can occur. The limit state for collapse due to flexure, limit state for collapse due to shear, and so on and so forth. For each of these we will try to see what is the failure criteria and at what load the failure can occur. Okay, so different failure criteria or failure state or limit state are indicated. One is, you can say, only the stress type of failure that is indicated. Then we have other types of failure criteria. This one is the limit state of collapse. That collapse can occur due to flexure, due to compression, or due to debonding, and so on. Other one is the serviceability criteria, where we say that the failure can occur due to excessive deformation. So I want to ensure that also as a failure to be avoided. Then there can be failure due to excessive cracking, particularly in case of water retaining structure like water tanks and so on. If there is excessive cracking, then the leakage might start, and that can lead to corrosion of reinforcement, and so on and so on. So in course of practice, they are indicating that okay, you design the structure, no problem with that, but you also calculate what is the crack width for concrete. Otherwise, in our normal design process, what we do is we say that concrete below the neutral axis, we assume that okay, it is cracked, so I am not bothered about it. Its strength is not taken into account. But if there is excessive cracking, then in working stress method we say that it is neglected, that is not considered at all. But is it acceptable? The cracks which are occurring, are they acceptable? So in working stress method, that is not a criteria at all. While here in limit state method, we say that that is a criteria. I want to calculate what is the crack width and limit the crack width to a specified value. So course of practice indicate that you calculate the crack width and limit it to 0.1 mm or 0.2 mm depending upon the kind of application that you have got. If it is a very corrosive atmosphere in industrial structures where very poisonous gases are released, or gases which are harmful to reinforcement, if they are released, then their crack width may be limited to even lesser value, and so on. So in case of structure, its application and its surrounding, we say that okay, it has got to be limited, the performance is to be guaranteed, satisfactory. So for that we say that we have the limit state of cracking. So once you design the structure, and if that is the condition specified, either for design purpose or the course of practice indicate or your contract indicates that your cracking should be limited to such and such value, then we say that okay, we have to ensure that the limit state of serviceability under cracking is to be satisfied. And then we have got limit state of vibration. Sometimes excessive vibrations are noticed in industrial floors or other types of application when very large spans are provided. So as people walk on it, sometimes there are vibrations and they are not acceptable level sometimes. So we have to ensure that the vibration doesn't cause excessive uncomfort to the users. So we have that also as a serviceability criteria, that excessive vibrations are to be are to be prevented. Then we have got fire resistance. Again, that is a kind of durability criteria, that we say that if there is a fire in the building, then it takes some time for fire to be extinguished. Okay, because you have to call the fire hydrant or the fire tender, so they will take their own time, and till then the structure must survive. So sometimes they say that okay, your fire rating of the structure must be 2 hours or 1 hour. So depending upon that, you have to provide adequate cover to reinforcement, because concrete will get damaged, and in the end, if it damages the reinforcement, then of course the failure is imminent. So we want to ensure that there is enough fire resistance as a serviceability criteria, that there is a fire rating, and we have to satisfy the fire rating criteria. Sometimes fire rating is for only a half an hour or 1 hour, because if you are building a structure within the city limit itself, then perhaps your services or infrastructure is good, and then you have got a better chance of survival. Only you require half an hour or 1 hour exposure, and so on and so forth. So likewise, all these criteria are part of the design process. So you have got limit state of collapse, that failure against collapse is to be prevented due to various causes, and failure against serviceability, that is its functional requirement, must also be satisfied. So all these criteria are required to be incorporated in your design process, and then you will say that okay, your structure is designed for serviceability as well as for collapse. Okay, so we can now say that we are ready with the basic concept. So now we say that we have got a material which is to be designed to carry certain load. So we have various design criteria depending upon the method you are using. So we say that firstly, let us see what is the strength of the material, like concrete. So when you say concrete is to be used for design purpose, then I need to know what is the strength of it. Now when you determine the strength of concrete, the easiest way, and which is currently followed everywhere, is to take out the cubes of concrete, test them in laboratory, and then okay, then you have got some averaging process for determining that okay, I have tested so many cubes and this is the average strength of that, and so. So code has defined a characteristic strength for it, where characteristic strength means you are testing a large number of cubes and then you take the average of that, and then we say that the characteristic strength means the value of strength of material below which not more than 5% of the test results are expected to fall. So you have got, let us say, some grade of concrete. So you test all these number of cubes, and then cubes, of course there will be some variation in the test results. So we say that if you are getting some strength averaging of all those results, then we say that not more than 5% of the cubes are having strength less than that value. So you have tested, you have got the results, suppose 30 Newton per mm square is the average value, so that not more than 5% of the cubes you have tested have got below 30 as the value. Then we say that okay, that is my characteristic strength of the material. So we say that characteristic strength is determined in this way actually at site. Now that is as far as the design strength, the strength is concerned, the strength which is available for the material. Now I am using in limit state method, I am using a partial safety factor. So that I will say that okay, this is my cube strength, the crushing strength, but I don't want to design my structure for that crushing strength. I will use some partial safety factor for that, and that partial safety factor is given by the codes of practice. So we say that as far as the codes of practice are concerned, we have got the partial safety factors for limit state of collapse. So code will say that okay, for dead load and imposed load you can use a partial safety factor of 1.5. Sometimes you can use for limit state of serviceability only 1, and so. So codes has given the partial safety factor for material. Please remember, it is a safety factor for material, that you have got the characteristic strength, that characteristic you reduce by that factor. So you are using a factor of that load factor, the partial safety factor as 1.5, and say that okay, for my design purpose I will take the design strength as equal to my characteristic strength divided by the partial safety factor. Okay, I think this is I think okay. So this is design strength as the characteristic strength divided by the partial safety factor. Then second is the characteristic load. So you have got load which you say, okay, live load so much for residential building, for industrial building, for public place and so on. So you have got different loads specified. Now you have to consider the characteristic load, that if there is actual data available, that characteristic load means not more than 95, there is a 95% probability that load will not be exceeded. So you are indicating that. Now these values are prescribed by the codes of practice. After doing a lot of survey of the actual situation, they finally say that okay, your live load for residential building is 2 kilonewton per square meter, because there is a 95% probability that will not be exceeded. Okay, so then they will specify, okay, you take this as a characteristic load. So this characteristic load is specified by the codes of practice, and then accordingly your design load is indicated with as equal to your characteristic load multiplied by a partial safety factor for load. We have got partial safety factor for material as well as partial safety factor for load. For material we divide it because we want to reduce the stress. For load we increase it by that factor. So we have got the partial safety factor for load indicated in this particular fashion, that this partial safety factor for load we say it is 1.5 for dead load and superimposed load and so on and so forth. So we have got partial safety factor for load which we use for increasing the load. Over here your design load or characteristic load multiplied by the partial safety factor, while there for material we reduce it by that factor and so. Okay. Now partial safety factor for material, for steel it is 1.15. By that only you reduce the design strength, because steel has got a better quality control, while for concrete it is 1.5. So because it is generally made at site and by relatively crude methods, so we say that your partial safety factor for materials are 1.15 for steel and 1.5 for concrete, while partial safety factor for loads, there we increase the load, and they are also indicated by the design codes itself. So we say that we have got these simple criteria for designing the different material, different members. So we have determined the forces in the members by the entire process, where we have carried out the analysis, got the forces. We have also assumed some sizes. So I want to now design that particular member. So I will say that to design it, I need to know what is the material strength, what factor of safety is to be provided and so on. So I have got the partial safety factor in the limit state method, where we have partial safety factor for material strength, partial safety factor for loads. For loads we increase it, and for material we reduce it, as simple as that. Now having considered all these basic concepts over here, we now say that let us see that our objective is to design the different members under different types of loads. Okay. So we say that we have got the structure where various members are carrying different types of forces. As we have seen, there are only 4 types of forces to be considered: the axial force, tension or compression, and we have got the bending moment, we have got the shear force and the torsional moment. Okay. Now we consider a simple method, the working stress method, which we say is to be used for designing a member for axial force. Very simple concept. So we say that the capacity of a member, so we have already got the size of the member. Okay. So you have provided a column 600 by 600. So for that column, let us say some reinforcement is provided. Code says that you provide this much percentage as minimum reinforcement. So with that reinforcement, now what is the axial force carrying capacity of that particular column in working stress method? So in working stress method, the capacity is calculated in a very simple way. The total axial load carrying capacity of the member is equal to the permissible stress, which we have seen for working stress method, as the ultimate stress divided by factor of safety. So we have got the permissible stress into area of concrete, as simple as that. Plus now we have got a concept involving steel and concrete. So we say that if we have got the material, if you have got the combined material, that is column with concrete and reinforcement, they are all bonded together, so they will deform equally because they are together. So if they are deforming equally, then we say that concrete has got some modulus of elasticity, steel has got another modulus of elasticity. The result of that is you have got two different materials. So I will say that I am showing the longitudinal view of the column. So this is a column section, and there is a reinforcement here and a reinforcement there, and so on. So if you see the cross section, okay, I have got this simple column, and I have got this reinforcement. Okay. Now under the influence of this load that I am applying, you will say that they will deform equally. So we say that if they have to deform equally, means both of them will have the same strain, because the change in length upon original length. So concrete has got the strain epsilon concrete, and steel has got the strain epsilon steel, but both are equal. So we say that they are getting compressed by same amount. Thereby I will say that if concrete is getting so much strain, then we will say that for concrete, the stress in concrete, so I will say that the stress in concrete upon the modulus of elasticity of concrete is actually the strain in concrete. So this is my strain. Okay, so if the strain is same, then I will say that over here this is my sigma s upon es, because both of them are getting same amount of strain. So the strain is given by stress upon E. So I will say that the strain in steel, therefore now I will say that the stress in steel is thereby given by E of steel upon E of concrete multiplied by sigma C. As simple as that. So we now say that the stress in steel is related to the Young's modulus of steel upon Young's modulus of concrete, which is called as the modular ratio. So that modular ratio is given in the code itself, or different sources are available. So generally it is between 7 to 10. So that is the kind of ratio you get for steel, normal steel that you have got. And over here code has indicated that, because though the modular ratio is, we can say maybe 5 to 10 times of that, but the permissible stresses in steel are much higher. For concrete you might have a permissible stress for M30 grade concrete of 10 with a factor of safety of 3, but for steel with a factor of safety of about 1.15 you will have a permissible stress of 200 or 200 MPa, while for steel concrete it is only 10. So many times we see that in the elastic limit the ratio of the capacity of steel and concrete is much larger than their modular ratio. So E value is only 10 times, but permissible stresses are 20 times for the different grade of concrete. The result of that is code has indicated that you take the stress in steel thereby 1.5 times the modular ratio over here rather than only modular ratio. So here code has indicated that the load carrying capacity of the material column, if you want to consider, it is stress in concrete multiplied by area of concrete plus stress in concrete multiplied by 1.5 times M, which is going to give me stress in steel multiplied by area of steel. Now as far as area of concrete is concerned, you need to take the net area of concrete. So if you are providing 1% as steel, then you need to take only 99% as the gross cross section of the concrete column and then take the load carrying capacity in that fashion. So our working stress method indicates that if it is axial force that you are considering for design purpose, then we need to consider the capacity of the column to carry only axial force. We are taking very simple concept that it is only axial force for which I am designing the member, and for that, for working stress method, I have got this simple expression to know what is the load carrying capacity under working stress method for that particular column. Now this individual under working stress method, the code has given for different grades of concrete as to what is the permissible stress in compression, because that we are going to use over here. This sigma cc is the permissible stress in concrete. So code has given these values for different grades of concrete. So if it is M30 grade concrete, as we have seen that it is with a factor of safety of 3, you are getting permissible stress in compression. Now permissible stress in compression is given under two cases. One, you have got direct compression where it is only axial load in the column, and second is due to bending compression. Under bending condition, as you have seen over here, that for any beam, when you consider the cross section of the beam, then we see that for the beam, if you draw the stress diagram, your top fibers are in compression, your bottom fibers are in tension, and you have got the stress variation like that. Okay. So your maximum compression is present over here, and as you go towards neutral axis, the stress gets reduced. So we see that if at all you want to specify what is the permissible stress in compression, then only you will have one fiber, extreme fiber, which will be carrying that, and all other fibers have got much more capacity to remain elastic, but we are not able to utilize them. So code has indicated that if it is a compression due to bending, you better use slightly more, because you are having only one fiber which will carry that, while all other fibers will carry less. The result of that is you have got better margin available. So code says that for M30 grade concrete, if it is bending compression, you go up to 10, but for direct compression where all fibers have the same stress, then we see that there is no additional safety available in any of the fiber. So their code says that you go for 80% of that, so that is 0.8 of that. So if it is direct compression for 10, then for bending compression 10, then your direct compression is 80% of that, because there is no additional margin available. All fibers are in the same situation over here. So we can say that as far as our permissible stresses are concerned, under axial compression, we have to take appropriate figure and then determine under working stress method the load carrying capacity over here. As far as modular ratio is concerned, code has given a simple expression depending upon the various research data which was available, that is 280 upon 3 times sigma bending compression for that concrete. So we say that for concrete, then you have to take the grade of concrete, see what is the compression for that, and then accordingly determine the modular ratio, which will be utilized in calculating the axial load carrying capacity of that column. So we can say that under axial capacity of the column, then we have got this simple criteria for designing the member for axial compression and so on. So we can say that under axial compression for the given column, we will say that the given material is now able to carry so much of the load, and thereby we will say that our design for concrete under compression is now with this simple criteria over here. I think maybe we will stop for the day and continue next time onwards, because we have to then consider more complex situation for designing it for shear, bending and torsion. I think the basic concept which I wanted you to see is only this, that you consider the basic theories of design, the working stress method, the ultimate load theory and the limit state method. Under these theories, of course, the design is carried out, and we will take simple examples wherein we will see how different they predict the capacities in different types of forces and so on and so forth. Okay, I think presently we will stop for the day. Okay.